Let's join Maggie Linton on SiriusXM Urban View, Channel 110.
Well, welcome back. Later this hour, financial workshops for women. But we begin with a man Adele and I met last weekend at the National Publicity Summit. Dr. Robert Weil has worked with pro and Olympic athletes and is known as the sports doctor. He's here to share tips on how to be a good parent to child athletes. Good morning, Dr. Weil.
Good morning, Maggie. It's a pleasure to follow up with that exciting meeting like we talked about and to communicate with some of your listeners. Looking forward to it.
All right. Let's begin with a little bit of your background, because when I said pro and Olympic athletes, you really have helped.
Well, thank you. Yes, I've been very fortunate to, I'm a sports podiatrist, foot specialist, and most of what I do in sports medicine involves orthotics, the orthotic therapy. So I've seen the John McEnroes and Tracy Austin from the world of tennis. They really all came to see this famous trainer, Maggie, that I have been involved with for 35 years, Bob Guida, who's a kinesiotherapist, and he's rehabbed some of the best athletes way back into the 70s, late 70s, when performance training, no one knew how to spell it, really. So I've been a podiatrist, and my superstar lately is the Olympic men's figure skating champion, Evan Lysacek. As we speak, he's struggling to come back to try to defend his title, Maggie, but he was 10 years old when I put orthotics in his skates. I don't want to date myself or anything, but so my passion is the high-performance kid. They're not all Olympians by any respect. Many times we see seniors and walkers and runners, but we've mixed in with a lot of these athletes, the Super Bowl Bears, Walter Payton, over the years, which has been very exciting.
All right. Let's begin with the right way for parents to parent their children who are active as athletes, and if nothing else, not getting them too involved.
Well, I think it's a great question because it runs the gamut. We all want our kids to have fun. We all want to try to prevent injury. And sometimes if we have a young musician or a young athlete or a young special chess player, then we might be spending a lot of time and attention to their particular talent. So we might see a 10 or 12-year-old, all it changes is the uniform. They might be a ballet dancer, they might be a soccer player, and they might be doing these activities, Maggie, every day or almost every day and spending a lot of time and attention. So the contest, as we know, with the old Little League parents screaming on the sidelines, have you ever seen Dance Moms?
Oh, I really, I can't even stand that show.
Yes.
First of all, the woman who leads it just is so abusive.
Yes, I guess that's reality television.
No, it's not. I think that, I just know I can't stand her, and I can't stand to watch that show.
But it's the example of what not to do. Mm-hmm. I have a story when you talk about whose passion, whose fire is it. So one of the first rules is it has to be the young boy or girl's passion or fire. It can't be mom or dad who wants someone who's going to get a scholarship or who thinks their kid's going to be something special and actually pushes them, drags them, convinces them to continue with their sport. And the story is about Evan and his mom, Tanya Lysacek, grew up here in Naperville, Illinois. And on my radio show, The Sports Doctor, and it is a show I've done over 20 years, Maggie, in the Chicago area, where we talk about issues like this, and you'll see how it relates to injuries. I asked his mom, how did you know you weren't overdoing it with Evan when he was a young boy? You weren't over-pushing him, and you weren't, going too far. And she said, Dr. Weil, we had ice time like about 6:30 in the morning, and I never had to wake the kid up. He had his gloves and hat on. He was ready to go to the rink. He was all excited. And that's one of the things that we stress, number one, which is whose dream is it? The other thing is to respect injuries, to respect problems. If we see our son or daughters complaining, Dad, my ankle hurts, I know I have 3 games, and, I'm sore, and is to respect that. And the concussion world has really brought this to notice, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. And you know, that's some of the signs that parents need to pay attention to, rather than, as you said, pushing their kids out the door, but really paying attention to them saying, I can't make it this time, and that being okay.
Yes, that was a big point. Of course, when there's a lot of time and money invested, the young kid is a young gymnast who's traveling and being in contests. And again, I see young skaters who already are every day by 9, 10, 11, 12 years old and jumping and working out and doing ballet and usually loving it. And most of the families are wonderful. But sometimes we'll see where the pressure's on, that intelligent rest is a phrase I use a lot, and it means what it says, which is I tell parents all the time, if you need over-the-counter anti-inflammatories or pain medicine for your son or daughter to participate, you're over the line. You can't be looking, and this is really where drugs in sports starts. It starts very, very early, where we're dealing with a lot of this overuse stuff because the kids are specializing very early, and sometimes too early. So we tell parents also, Maggie, don't be a critic with your young athlete. Don't be an analyzer. I had sports psychologists on my show a lot. We still do. We could do 10 shows on the mental game, I'm sure, couldn't we?
Yes, easily.
Exactly.
Very much so.
Whether you're Tiger Woods or you're this one or they're coming back from an injury.
Or the Michael Jordans.
Exactly. The absolute Michael Jordans, where we would see that the pressures are immense in so many areas, yet you have this type of focus that's almost like you're from another planet. So we want parents to don't be a critic, concentrate on what they're doing well, regardless, and again, we're talking recreational level that starts to get serious, where that young boy or girl is, they're not once a week, they're 3 times a week, they're 4 times a week, but even in the lesser level, where we're talking about the Little League and some of these other young sports, where we're talking about to parents, again, to concentrate on what's positive, don't be a critic, have fun. Mm-hmm. Your boy or girl, I've seen youngsters who quit the sport, like baseball, because they just were tired of the criticism. They were just tired, hey, Ma, you know? So the concussion part, Maggie, is so important because, again, when a kid is, and parents should know if they see changes in mood, if the kid can't sleep, if he all of a sudden is acting differently, he's a football player, he's been pounding around consistently, then you have to pay attention because the emphasis is for many of the kids to try to fake it, Maggie.
Because they see the grown athletes doing that all the time.
Well, the famous but truthful quote, the just retired Brian Urlacher, the great middle linebacker of the Bears. Again, there's so much controversy, and for another show, but really, football is unsafe at any age. I'm sorry for all of us football fans. We all love what it is, but it's physically so out of hand that, let alone mentally, that they're starting to see. But Brian said, you know, if I had my bell rung, he was being a little facetious, I'd tell him my foot hurts, you know, or I would tell him I hurt my back because I don't want to be taken out of the game. And those kinds of honesties, so we will see young boys and girls in the office with a foot or ankle or shin splints or whatever happens to be, Maggie, who are, quote-unquote, faking it because their mom's sitting there with her arms folded, or her dad, or the coach, and the pressures. You know, if you play club soccer or club volleyball or you're a dancer, you're there 4 or 5 days a week.
Right.
So those are the kinds of things that we stress when we're talking about trying to make sense of the kinds of intense pressure earlier all the time on these boys and girls to perform.
Once again, we're talking with Dr. Robert Weil. He is known as the Sports Doctor, and you can find out more by, of course, going to his website, sportsdoctorradio.com. Let's talk about some of the signs that people can look for with a concussion, especially with the young children. But, and when you say young children, it can be, I've seen little kids playing as early as 5 years old playing football, not doing a whole lot of tackling and that kind of stuff, but, straight on through to the college age.
Oh, yes. There's not a youth child football that's not doing lots of tackling and lots of hitting. And nobody knows what it means. The National Football League's been dancing around this forever. Anybody who saw that incredible 2-hour special, League of Denial, I've had on my show Matt Cheney, who wrote a book called Spiral of Denial. It was about all of this stuff that we all know that's going on with the drugs in sports and the whole idea of hiding the concussions. Like we mentioned earlier, I think, again, we see kids who are playing, they're hitting in hockey. They're playing very, very early, and anybody can get a concussion because they got hit, they fell, they slid into second base, this kind of thing. And usually we will see if somebody's a little disoriented, or let alone if they're unconscious, or where we have the idea that I'm dizzy, I don't feel good, then of course that child on the field absolutely should be taken out of the game and not put back in ever. If there is a suspicion. Now, we all know, we all remember, hey, how many fingers? Get back in the game. That was the modus operandi. Maggie, I was friends with and treated Dave Duerson of the Bears, the great Super Bowl player who committed suicide. He shot himself in the chest so they could save his brain so it could be analyzed. A horrible, horrible story. The far end of who knows what we're going to see as hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of football players get older and get older and get older at all levels. But with youngsters, again, if we see those kinds of signs, we want to pay attention. If the kids in a contact sport, junior high or high school, that involves football or hockey, where there's lots of hitting. And what we found, the neurologist and the specialist, is it's not necessarily that you got knocked out or you had a concussion numerous times that puts you at risk. It might be the repetitive micro hits, the repetitive slamming around of the head with all the hard hitting and the contact. So the kids who are involved in those kinds of sports, again, we're telling mom and dad to pay attention to anything that's changed or different.
Right.
Gee, the kid can't sleep. I don't know. His grades are terrible. Gee, he's angry all the time. Gee, he's different. And Dr. Tom Brady is a psychologist on the East Coast. He was on The Sports Doctor. And again, you can go to sportsdoctorradio.com. You could hear 3-4 years of shows that we've done, a lot of them on these topics, or foot injuries and ankle problems, etc. He's a psychologist, Maggie, and he has been screaming about what he's seen and written about in the high school football player. We know about the NFL, and these guys are pros and making millions of dollars. But Dr. Brady's talking about it's scary what we're seeing, but it's a multi-billion-dollar sport, and we see all of these things that are going on. So anything in the behavior area, I think people have to pay attention to, and physically. Again, I'm a sports podiatrist, so when we're talking about physically respecting our son or daughter's complaints or response to injury. Dad, I know I rested 5 days. To parents of serious athletes, rest means a few days.
Right.
We might be saying, Maggie, the kid needs 2-3 weeks off. And, well, can't we take some Advil? Or, so having that kind of supervision makes sense. And then the better the athlete, the earlier the age, the more these things become important. I'm a big advocate, Maggie, of sports psychology. The late Jim Vickery, Dr. James Vickery, spent about 5 years on my show, The Sports Doctor. We would always be talking these kinds of things besides the physical side.
Right.
And he talked an awful lot, again, about the criticism and the pressures and the idea of trying to still have fun as you started getting more and more serious with the fact of this young boy or girl was that talented. And then the decision came up, and this is very important. should my son or daughter specialize? I mean, she's only 12, but she's playing soccer, and the coaches are telling to play that all the time. So we run into these overuse injuries that we wouldn't see in the kid who wasn't a racehorse, who wasn't in an everyday type of situation. So the idea that both physically and the mental side are very, very important when we're talking about the nuances of parenting a child athlete. And even though, again, mostly I met great families and great kids, and almost all of these talented kids are good students, and they're a heck of a lot better than the average student. And
because they have to, you have to be a good student, because you can't play nowadays if you don't have grades.
Yes.
That's one of the rules, one of the smartest rules I've ever seen passed. And,
yeah, good luck to you to
schools.
it being. Good luck to you to it really being administrated.
Yeah. Well, no, I really find a number of athletes that really are graduating.
Oh yes.
I mean,
That's
they really are.
Yes.
They're not only just graduating from high school, but also graduating from college. Because again, if you want to play a sport, you've got to have decent grades in order to get into the next level. That colleges aren't just taking you now with D's and F's. They don't do that. They won't give you a scholarship. You may come to that school, but you won't be on a scholarship. Let me reintroduce you.
It's
Dr. Robert.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Dr. Robert Weil. He is the sports doctor, and you can find out more at his website, sportsdoctorradio.com. And by the way, folks, you're welcome to call in if you're a parent who may be worried about overuse of your child in athletics. You're certainly welcome to call. It's 866-801-8255. Once again, that's 866-801-8255. Go ahead, Dr. Weil.
I wanted to mention that I think something is very important. I tell moms and dads all the time to absolutely communicate with your coach or the coach of your youngster. Usually there's a great relationship. Sometimes we can see, again, using the examples in Dance Moms, and it does bring out some of these examples of these pressures, like why isn't my kid playing, and all of these things that we used to see from Little League. And we try to tell mom and dad all the time that absolutely having your concerns brought up. I think you're playing my kid so much. His legs are killing him. I know he's the best player, but remember that used to be such a problem in the young pitchers in Little League?
Right.
You had one talented kid, you threw him one game after another until they started realizing, holy cow, these kids, they're getting Tommy John surgery at 14 years old. This is like nuts. So the ability to communicate with the coach, if you have a concern, if you're upset about one thing or another, if you're happy about things. I mean, most of these coaches early on really are volunteers, and it ain't easy, to say the least. So absolutely don't be afraid and be proactive regarding communication with your son or daughter's coach.
I think it's really important also that parents realize that it's okay if your athlete doesn't follow one sport with another. And when we were in high school, it was, and even junior high, you started out playing football, and the same guys that played football went on to play basketball. And then a lot of times in the spring, they were also running track. And talking about the overuse of the bodies.
Yes, it's an interesting question. It's still a good one. I remember my son Adam. He played basketball and baseball, Glenbow West High School here in Illinois, in Glen Ellen. And after his basketball season, he virtually went to his locker and took his glove out in order to start with the baseball team. And but the dilemma is, on the one hand, that intelligent rest that I mentioned, where we see once you get into the club, the gymnastics, the figure skating, volleyball, where we see soccer, where we start to see the pressure where the coach might be saying, and you're the young player, if you played this sport instead of the other sports, you might be pretty special.
Right.
Well, I like the other sport, and there still are some of these 2-3-letter athletes. Remember, there used to be a lot of them, like you just mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
But now the reality is, but John McEnroe used to say, he said, hey, man, I played soccer. That's why I was so quick on my feet. So hard to argue with him,
yeah.
Back in the 80s, and the jury is still out. Here's a good point to consider if you're a mom or dad making that decision. it's the kid's decision. If the kid loves the particular sport, let them rock and roll, but make sure you're paying attention to off-sport conditioning, strengthening their feet and ankles, working balance work. That doesn't mean more running and pounding, but make sure that you're including working the opposites and getting the body as well prepared, knowing you're overusing the heck out of it. If your kid feels, I don't know which sport I really, really like the best, then play them all. Let's try to, at the very least, we need one season in between of rest.
Right.
We can't, come on, Maggie, you can't play 5 sports. If you're a superstar, I wouldn't fight with you. Even though we might say that, we got our massage therapist, our chiropractor, our sports podiatrist, because a lot of times one of the biggest questions is, are you even in the right shoe for you, for your particular sport, in the world of podiatry? So, and we do see absolutely a big increase in the overuse category of injuries. And overuse doesn't mean you got tackled and you tore something or you stepped in a hole and you got hurt. Overuse is, gee, Dr. Weil, I don't remember when my leg started hurting me, but, I'm playing 9 days a week. So we would start to be looking at those kinds of attentions and trying to get some intelligent rest mixed in, because there are many more youth-oriented overuse injuries by far than there used to be, and a lot of it is the specialization for some of the reasons we just touched on.
You just mentioned something that I was going to bring up since you are a podiatrist. Getting into the right shoes is important when you're both on or off the field, the court, the whatever the case may be, because I see so many bad shoes out there, especially for young girls and women. It's like, I don't need a 6-inch heel in order to be able to look cute.
Absolutely. This is a huge challenge. I call it accepting the challenge, which is the high heels. Whether it's flip-flops that the kids love, I tell kids, hey, get into something like a fit flop, one of these, if you're going to use that's got an arch, or a Birkenstock, something like that. But high heels are a challenge in a lot of respects. They put tremendous pressure on the foot. And foot type is inherited, so you might have some hammer toes or bunion concerns, and getting into a cramped shoe and then elevating you, good luck. It's very, very difficult. So sometimes we see that also the posture is really, really thrown off. So they're starting to see knee, back, hip problems besides the foot problems with heels. So what I recommend is training for it.
You can train for heels?
Yeah, you could train for it, Beck. It's another show. Let me know when it is.
I'll let you know about that.
But quickly, I would tell you, again, that if you, number one, you identified and you knew what type of foot type you have. You have a high arch, you have wide ball of the foot, et cetera, et cetera. Number two, you then look at what type of toe box width, depth gives you the best type of comfort you can get, maybe an open toe. You pay attention to that. Three is you try to talk yourself into some variability. You don't want to be in the same heel height all the time. You might start seeing the Achilles tendon, your calves are killing you, especially, Dr. Weil, I started a walking program, and I've been in heels all the time in business, and my ankles and my calves, because for 20 years we've worn heels. So we then add some strengthening exercises or massage to your repertoire. We would say, listen, do some rubber band strengthening, do some balance board strengthening with your feet and ankles. It's as valuable for a superstar who's looking to jump higher as it is for the gal who's looking to tolerate, let alone if you're dancing with the stars. Now, Lysacek, if you recall, after he won the gold medal, was in Dancing with the Stars.
Exactly.
And I talked to his partner, and I was amazed at these gals who could dance like they do, so athletically in those heels, but don't think they didn't pay for it. So you can, by looking at those points, if you've got some corns and calluses and you get routine podiatry or at least big help. And if you pay attention to some strengthening with your feet, ankles, every time you step on a tilt board, you're working every joint, your back, your knees. Are you familiar, Maggie, with those BOSUs?
Yes.
Yes,
yes.
fabulous.
Yeah, yeah.
So if your kid's the best athlete in the country, I'm telling them, get on that balance instability.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying the same thing to Grandma. She could hold on, working the balance. And for you, if you said, hey, listen, I wear heels a lot. I really feel it. I'd love to wear them forever if I can. Then I'm telling you, those are the kinds of tips that usually are a secret still when it comes to strengthening and could be helpful.
Well, I have to tell you, I've gotten to the point where being cute means nothing. Being comfortable is everything.
Well, at least, right, it's in the top 5, right? Being comfortable is in the top 5.
Comfort to me is the A+, on especially with feet, because I've had some issues. And I was just going to say, we're going to a podiatrist is probably the best way for people to find out about their arches and what they can do to strengthen.
Yeah,
Am I correct?
Especially with the advance of orthotics, where, again, if we're talking about making this young boy or girl a step or two quicker, I want my son or daughter to have the best of balance. Then orthotics, which are positioners of the foot ankle joints, are very, very valuable. They're not arch supports because you have weak arches. So that sometimes is a revelation. But absolutely podiatry, whether it is toenails, whether it is podiatry, is many times the first profession to see diabetics. Because people might have numbness or they might have burning or something's going on with my feet, and they find out through podiatry that wow, I have to pay attention. But when it comes to some sort of information and education regarding all sorts of shoes, podiatry is the one to see.
All right. That is Dr. Robert Weil. We're going to have you back on. You know, you just mentioned something about care of feet for diabetics is something that's very important and is often overlooked until too late.
Another important topic I write about in my professional magazines also is the podiatry and childhood obesity, which is, again, this new weight-related pressure on young kids' feet, ankles, and legs because they're overweight. So I'll look forward to it, Maggie. It was really, really a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Many thanks again to the Sports Doctor. It is Dr. Robert Weil. Find out more at his website, sportsdoctorradio.com. Once again, it's sportsdoctorradio.com. And coming up, learning about financial security. Stay tuned.
We'll be right back with more conversation about today's hottest topics right after this short break. This is the Maggie Linton Show on SiriusXM Urban View.